Joseph, how are you doing today?
Really good, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Actually, really good because it's going to be 100 degrees today in Minnesota.
Oh,
I don't know when
nice.
this gets released, but my air conditioner went out, and I found out that I had a service plan on it with the energy company, so they came out and fixed it for free. So I was like, yeah, I just
Nice.
won the lottery.
That's a good way to
Totally
kick the plan.
irrelevant to what we're doing, but yeah, so how well I was doing.
I love the fact that air conditioning is what makes it a win, and the fact that you're in the Minneapolis area and I'm in Canada and we're relishing the air conditioning is too much. It's too good.
And it's first world problems. We're blessed to be able to have that problem. And my wife grew up with no air conditioning. So it's like, progress, right? This generation's going to have air conditioning. Anyways, totally unrelated to the show. I'm excited to have you on because you've got multiple exits behind you. And you were just talking about, hey, what are we going to get into war stories or this? And there's going to be plenty of ground to cover. And for the listeners, why don't you just give us the broad brushstrokes of your background, understand a little bit about you, and then we can take parts of the story and unpack them.
For sure. So, computer engineer by education. So went to top-rated engineering school. Had a lot of fun there. I'm a terrible engineer. You shouldn't let me build any bridges or production code. I'm very fortunate to have much more competent developers and engineers who work with me. But 5 times entrepreneur, all in the business-to-business software space, and they've been everything from kind of bootstrapped, 2 people in a garage, kind of working on things, to larger businesses, sold to multinationals, ended up running NetSuite's global HR technology business for several years, and back in the fray now. So my journey is kind of this repeat entrepreneurial journey, and I feel like I've been, refining my craft every step of the way. With my latest venture, we're thinking about it more as something really long-term. I've got young kids and I don't want to start another venture until they're out of the house. So I've got at least a decade or 2 ahead of me. And now we're helping people transition from other industries into tech and scaling their careers with a really fun career success platform. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Why don't you explain that a little bit and understand like what is it that you're teaching them and why? And then I want to go back and understand because you said 5 times entrepreneur and there's a bunch of learnings along the way. And then you're teaching people too. So curious of what you're teaching and what are some of the students doing, and then we can kind of weave that together of how you got there compared to based on the 5 exits that you had.
Yeah, for sure. So the kind of what we're doing and what we're teaching, a lot of people think about a change in their career, like, hey, I want to move from job A to job B. But what we're really focusing on is long-term career success. And I mean, the stats are really, really terrible. For everyday people, wage growth has stopped. People are not earning more. On average, people switch jobs. So they're pivoting between companies, every 2.5 years. And I mean, college debt, all those stats. What we're doing is we're teaching people how to sell technology and how to chart their career path through the tech industry. And then we actually introduce them to technology companies. So, I mean, the stats are pretty astronomical. On average, our members are doubling their income. They're landing amazing roles. We have 100% job satisfaction with our members. And yeah, it's really crazy now moving from business to business sales. Where you hear, great, you helped my conversion rate. And that feels good. I love supporting entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But now we have people doing things like posting videos of themselves dancing on TikTok, telling us we saved their life, telling us they feel more human. It really fills the cup. So I've moved from B2B to more B2C, and we're changing lives every day. It's really, really cool.
I'm super curious on how you landed there. And, before we get into any of the specifics that you're talking about, a couple of the mechanics of some of the exits that you had. And I want to get into some of those stories too. But along the way, Joseph, how did you land here where you're helping people? So you go from business to business conversion rates. Like, where did the mindset shift of like, hey, I need maybe something more? I mean, was there throughout the journey that they kind of hit you in the face, or was it a natural progression?
I think it was a little bit of both. The natural progression, I think a lot of the audience will probably resonate with. If anyone else listening in is kind of technical like me, really introverted like me, you might have experienced that sales is the worst part of building a company. Like building product, no problem. Get this up on the website, do that. I'll go buy some.
People
Facebook
will buy
ads.
if they put it up, right?
Yeah, but like practicing a pitch, and I mean things like going to BNI, for regular networking meetings to practice the way I pitch, all that stuff. Building the sales team was always the toughest. And I mean, honestly, after a few companies, I began to think it was just me. And it was always so hard. But then our latest tech company was selling to sales organizations, and we realized, oh my goodness, everyone has this problem. And where we realized we could solve it was actually my sister's experience. So the my growth and journey helped me see, hey, there's this gap. It's really painful. But then seeing my sister, who was an accomplished entrepreneur, she's run a martial arts studio, a food company, a training business. She wanted to get out of the entrepreneurial journey and be an employee for a bit. Make a big impact, be rewarded. So she wanted to be in sales, but didn't want to be fully accountable for everyone's livelihood. She was just in a different state of life.
Yeah.
And she was brilliant, and she wasn't getting any interviews. She wasn't getting any introductions. And we're sitting here saying, we've been in tech. We know what it means for someone to be successful. We know she could be successful. Why the heck is no one giving her that chance? And that was a real kind of, as you said, like the punch in the face to say, hey, we got to solve this. And we did. It's been really, really fun.
What were the reasons that she wasn't? That people like, what was some of the disconnect?
Yeah. So the interesting thing, when we talk about getting into tech, we're talking about hardware sales, software sales, and a lot of people don't realize how fast the space is growing. The average growth, even through the pandemic, is north of 20% a year, and that means by 2030 it's going to be an $800 billion industry. So these companies don't have the time, the space to catch a breath. You can never build a robust training organization that's there for 3 or 4 years, because in 3 to 4 years, your company looks entirely different. Your market looks different. So every software company is looking for the same thing. Someone who has already sold software to their market, ideally in a competitive space, and the numbers don't add up. There's like less than 100,000 software sales professionals out there, and the market needs another 400,000. So it's this really weird
Those
problem.
are crazy numbers. Holy cow.
It is insane. And no one has the bandwidth to do that kind of transitionary training. And so it's silly things like, and just because there's some people in the audience who probably don't know the industry as well, it's silly things like, we don't say SaaS for software as a service. We say SaaS. And interviewers would have a conversation, and you get the one slip of the tongue. You say SaaS, or you say R instead of ARR, and like, oh, you don't get the second interview.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just totally like X-nayed from one little minor acronym mispronunciation.
Yeah, and that was happening left, right, and center. And that's what got us really, candidly angry about it. We're like, whoa, this is a crap deal. We got to fix this.
So I want we can come back to this too, because like one of the things that I was excited about having you on the show is, with your, with multiple exits behind you and the understanding sales, one thing that I've noticed, and I'll just give you some context and see where in the different journeys that you've had that this might pull from, is these, whether it's clients that come out of our training program and like, hey, I now see my company like an asset. I might put the the financials in a way where they can actually see into the future, like net income, EBITDA. Then the goal is like, hey, I got to build a sales machine in order to predict how all this cash flow actually happens. Where in your journey did that start to come in? Like, because the reason I bring this up is a lot of people, unless they have some sort of education, they're talking to entrepreneurs that have sold. It's hard to look at your business from the other side and say, this is going to be a valuable asset as well. And sales is the engine that kicks it. And it's not just top line revenue that's important. It's like the right kind of clients with the right kind of products and services. So along your path, when you're focused on sales and these exits and the evaluations, how did you start to synthesize those concepts?
You used a great word earlier about how we're privileged to do what we're doing, and I feel very much the same. My parents have been very entrepreneurial, and so early on, I got the opportunity to kind of run my own business, and as a solopreneur, as an independent contractor, as a consultant. I was making business cards and brochures and diagrams and stuff like that. Yeah. But it was great. I was billing out at $50 an hour, while my peers were, earning like $6-7 bucks.
Yeah. $6-7 at a barista at a coffee shop or mowing lawns or who knows what.
No, totally. Yeah. Like, I don't know about, what you did during high school, but I remember saying, maybe I should go work in fast food. And I took a job at Wendy's for a little while because someone told me it builds character. I was like, oh, screw this. I'm going back to ads and brochures.
I was literally worked at a coffee shop, and then I went and dug pools because I was literally making twice as much money just shoveling dirt.
Totally. So I'm lucky in that my parents, pushed me to that. And that was fun and that was really good. But As I was going on to college, I had to stop doing the high school part-time contractor thing because I was going to another city. One of the things my mother said with me, and this is, everyone's heard this stuff, it's like, hey, remember, ask yourself, did you enjoy working in the business or on the business more? And the way she positioned it to me was, as you think about what you're doing, would you like to remember for being good, really good at building websites and building graphics, or really good at building a business?
How old were
And
you when you had this question?
oh, crap, let me do the numbers. 18. I was 18 then. Yeah.
Holy cow. That's
Yeah.
some insightful gold nuggets there.
Yeah, I didn't realize it until much later. Yeah, because the answer there was like, I don't know, but what thing is okay, but I'd like to be known for building a big business, and that reframed everything that I was doing. And it gets you out of that mindset of where you choose to invest. But I think thinking about it that way, do I want to be remembered for building a great business? Challenged me to think about really important things early, like our values, our culture, the scalability really early on. Because it's easy to get caught up in like the bookkeeping and the measurements and everything like that you need to do. Like you do have to do them. But I think it was the thing that helped me the most was emphasizing some of those kind of higher order questions really early on. And I didn't have to struggle with a lot of those value statements later.
So let's peel apart like what is a big business, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs get sucked into the vanity metrics of top line revenue, amount of employees, product launches, amount of users, or whatever it might be, and then they end up on my show because they've sold their business. Like I didn't know what value creation was. I knew what top line revenue or bottom line was. So maybe I don't know if one of the exits or how did you where did your mindset shift go from hey big business to what creates a valuable business? Was there things along the way that helped you shift that
Yeah.
and to look at that perspective?
I think I definitely matured in my thinking over the businesses. And I mean, if I kind of crank the clock all the way back, I mean, when I was in high school doing that solopreneur thing, I built a list of things I wanted to accomplish in life, and two of them, I saw them as two things. I was a weird kid. Like one of them was run $1 billion company, so like $1 billion in revenue, and one of them was bring a company public. And those are vanity things. Like those are like public. That's not necessarily a definition of value.
Mm-hmm.
But if I think back to the last company I sold, this is the one where so I'll put some benchmarks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, would you give us a rundown of the different kind of companies and some of
Sure.
the attributes of the exits, and then you can dive in.
So the first was simultaneously a success and an abject failure. We built some discussion forum software. We're taking a freemium approach, leveraging an open source model. When we tried to add paid services, the whole community kind of rebelled against it because we didn't talk about it from day one. We just talked about making a difference. And great tool, great app. It's still used on like 1 million websites internationally, like just great. But we had to turn it into an offer profit and let it do its own thing because we couldn't add that monetization layer. We ran a company that built a content management system. I mean, I suppose it's like dating myself, but it was like WordPress before WordPress was a thing. That was super cool. We sold that through resellers. So we would sell it to design and advertising agencies who would then build a website and then sell it. Again, super cool. We had an upfront license, but also a subscription piece because no designer knew how to support a website. So we had a subscription component in there. We carved that into two pieces and sold the services side to one agency and the software to our biggest reseller. That was super cool. The third was hyper local social networks. So think about the people you might bump into if you're walking your dog. Sucked in a ton of information like town councilors, schools, garbage pickup schedule, classified ads. We had that lined up to sell to our biggest competitor, and the whole deal fell apart hours before it was supposed to finish, and that was painful. The fourth, the most recent that I've sold before the current company, my fifth, the fourth was an HR software package. And we designed that one to say, hey, how do we build this effectively, investing as little of our own money as possible? Because all the others had been bootstrapped. This one, the total investment from the founders was a little over $10,000. We ended up raising about $3.5 million from outside investors, and then in about 3 years sold the company for $32 million.
Oh wow.
Yeah, pretty happy with the metrics. And that last one is what helped us think through value creation because we had to put a price on the sale. And that was interesting. That was really, really a challenge.
So tell me about that. What do you mean? Like, what was interesting about it, and how did you guys get to putting a price on the sale?
So, when we think about valuing an enterprise, I'm a believer that there's two very different lenses. The first is very computational. You can go and do a 409A, you could do your own, analysis, you could do the present value of the future cash flows. Yes. Those are all, and you should do those. So you've got a sanity check. The other is it's worth what you can get someone to pay for it. And very often these two are very different. I've seen markets where the cash flow model says it should be worth X, but nobody wants to buy it. So, all you're going to be able to command is a fraction of it, and vice versa. Ours was very much the latter model. If you did it on a multiple of future cash flows, we barely would have sold it for what we'd invested in it because it was a early stage high tech startup. The value for the acquirer was what we could do in their customer base if we were selling our software to their customers, if we were expanding their market. The other way is they were publicly traded. And so they're publicly traded as a multiple of revenues. And we could say, hey, our revenues in their multiple would raise their market cap by X, which puts a value on it. We had a second benchmark in terms of what people would pay for it. We were in the middle of fundraising. So we had a valuation pegged from some of our conversations with venture capitalists. So that was helpful. The real deciding factor that helped us decide the route to go was we mapped out what the outcome would be for the founders. If we chose to keep raising money, how would we get diluted? What our share would be? If we eventually went public, how might that share price eventually go? And there's a lot of fingers in the wind. And the other one was compared to selling now, what would be the outcome to the founders? And so we compared those two, and that helped really clarify the decision.
Super, super helpful. And like what I love about it is you literally just thought about the end scenario and reverse back into it. Very, very appropriate for the name of the show. And it's interesting, Joseph. In our training, we teach the very, very, very similar to how you worded it and articulated is that we call it intrinsic or the financial value, discounted cash flow. It's all based on the weighted average cost of capital, just very computational based on the riskier cash flow, but it's a cash flow play. And then there's the transactional value where there's a buyer and a seller. And then there's what we call the purpose of the deal. Where whoever the purpose, there could be 5 buyers and 5 completely different purposes that they're going to pay for your company. And it's not necessarily a cash flow play, but what we try to explain, I want to see if this relates to some of your prior exits when you spun off the software and the services, that the goal is choices. That's what I want for anybody, Joseph, after going through ours is hey, if you have cash flow, you can always literally guarantee yourself that you're going to yield that valuation based on the cash flow. But if it's not a cash flow play, you got to hustle your way to that goal line as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Something that caught my ear was you spun the services and the software play separately in one. What was going on there? Does the concepts we were just talking about relate to how that worked, or what was the reasoning behind that?
So both. So one of the things I'm a firm believer in is that most sales, including a business sale, are kind of inherently emotional and often irrational.
Yeah. Amen.
Totally. Yeah. And if I can get a purchaser or an investment community aligned around the excitement and potential in the business, I can generate more value for myself, my employees, my shareholders. So if I had to choose either direction, I would aim for the latter. So when I think about the businesses I'm building, I try to think about how do we create something that is really going to garner excitement, is going to have more impact in a transaction, and have a really big reason. Maybe it's, so for the Tribe HR, the HR software, we built the most beautiful HR software on the market. And the impact for that buyer was the ability to build remarkably usable software that would compel usage, just a huge unfair advantage. And that was worth a lot, arguably more than just the multiple on cash flows. In terms of the earlier transactions, what I realized is, and timing was incredible. It's it took me 8 years to do my undergraduate degree because I was running my businesses while I was doing it. My wife told me she wouldn't marry me if I didn't graduate before her.
Hey, but I'm worth a bunch of money and I still haven't graduated. What's more important?
Yeah, pretty much. So the timing of all of this was, I I graduated in, I think it was May. She graduated in August. So it was like just by the skin of my teeth. We got married in September and then took off for our honeymoon. And over the course of the honeymoon, I spent a bunch of time, I mean, like all entrepreneurs, you just waste every minute thinking about the business, thinking through the outcomes, the future, how it was going to go. And as we came back, realized this business was not going to realize that outsized outcome for everybody. We weren't going to be able to get to that kind of higher order outcome. So we said, great, you know what? We'll have better success running a different business. We should sell it. And the final transactions came down to an execution play. It's like, we've made the decision we're going to sell. So now just how do we maximize the outcome for everybody involved?
So so many interesting things about that. One is that was there, maybe it's your engineering brain, but like viewing that objectively? Because, and the reason that the context behind the question, Joseph, is that so many entrepreneurs that are the founders and it's their identity, their baby, and they can't objectively look at it like that. So like, how did you process that? And then how did you determine what was important in that outcome once you made the decision?
It's a tough one. You're so true. I think that comment that my mother made, like really early on in my career, helped me identify that, you know, my identity was as an entrepreneur. That's what I did, not a CEO of company X or owner of company Y. But the act of creating something is what I really enjoyed. You know, building something, scaling it, and that made it a lot easier to look at it objectively. I mean, it has a ton of benefits too. Like feedback I get from investors, from advisors, I never take it personally. You know, it's about the business. I don't see it as just a judgment call on me. It's about the system and the factors. And it's very liberating because the success of a business is not just dependent on what you do. It's on the market, on the competitors, on broader societal trends. And it saves you a bit from that heartache of like, oh my God, I've got to fix everything. Like sometimes you can't.
I think that was the most well-articulated way I've ever heard it described, because you're so right. And I don't think I've experienced what you said, but like being able to literally say, hey, this is not my deal. I'm trying the hardest I can. And this is my goal is to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. And it's this is just the thing that I'm working on today. It's how did you then go back? Let me see how the best way to ask this question. So, you know, I know that you're huge on sustainability and some big impacts that you want to make on the world. How do you take the things that are important to you and then put those in the same equation as maximizing a purchase price? Or because like this, I'm a big conscious capitalism fan. I don't know if you are. And like, there's this way of like, how do you do good and make money, and how do you balance them? How did you go about doing that? Because I can tell you're very conscious of the people and the stakeholders. Was there a certain process that you went through?
I guess short answer is yes. We've experimented and refined it over time. So one of the big things that I've internalized is that we can't kick the can down the road. You know, I think, and this is a valid point of view, just not one that I internalize. The idea of, well, you know, let's make money, get the exit, and then I've got more money to give away. And I think that works for a lot of people. What I found is that, and this is part of my own, what's the word? You know, ultimately, some people are procrastinators. I'll call a spade a spade. You know, I'm a procrastinator.
Exactly.
Kick things down. Yeah.
Yep. Just get shit done right now. Like, let's run right into the bus.
And so I've always found, you know, if it's always getting kicked down the can, there's a chance it might never happen. And I would hate myself if I got to a situation where I had a big exit, and because of circumstances or pressures or just where my head was at the time, I didn't give back at that time. So I'm a believer in kind of giving myself the rules and guidelines that will let me take actions that I can be proud of when I look at it, you know, in my dotage and old age. So things that we did were things like we've always had volunteer time off. You know, making it easy for team members to take time off to go and volunteer. That's easy. That doesn't hit our cash flow. And you know, a little bit of time off isn't going to hurt your performance or productivity either. So that's easy. Things like giving away a portion of the company. Or giving away a portion of receipts. So we've always done things like a percentage of each transaction going to a donation, or making it easy for customers to round up their transactions to add in a donation.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. So silly things like we would send out invoices, and you know, the invoice might be for like $1,562. And at the bottom, instead of saying, send us a check for this, we'd include that in smaller text, send us a check for this, or send us a check for this, and we'll make the donation to the charity that we approve.
Almost like the acorn investing philosophy or whatever, right?
Totally, yeah. And literally, the number of customers they get that, it's like a $20 ramp up, or like, on a $10,000 project, it might be a $100 roundup. The number who would look at it and say, oh, you know what? That's a great idea. We should do something like that. And they would just send it over. Yeah. So we'd look for those items. What we're doing right now, we've gone even further, and I'm super proud of the team. So we've donated 1% of our company to the Pledge 1%. Pledge. So effectively, when we've already given the equity away. So if we sell the company, the proceeds will just happen. I can't undo that. I feel very good about that.
Burn the boats.
We set up a community fund too. So we partnered with the foundation to set up a fund, and all of our employees get the opportunity to opt in. So, myself, our co-founders, all of our employees, we do an automatic deduction off our payroll, and it goes into an endowment. So the Uvaro Community Fund will always exist. If we have a bad year and we can't donate, it'll still be there giving money. If someone buys our company and they don't like the idea, they're just cranky Scrooges, the fund will still be there. And that feels really, really good. So
you just mentioned something that I think is a good question, is that when you've sold, because like you these things that you're talking about are personal, right? They're values that you have valued as the founder and as the CEO. There's always these trade-offs when someone's if they're going for maximized purchase price. And it all depends on whether you ran a controlled auction with an investment banker or if you're just taking one out of the blue offer. But there's a whole notion of choices of saying, okay, the company's worth this from like the cash flow perspective, but this is what it would be worth from the buyer, from the strategic buyer, and that would be the max value. But they don't like this. This is the way that they view the culture, the economy, people, whatever it might be. Did you have some I don't know if it was a matrix or how in your head you say not willing to sell for that price because of these reasons, so we're going to have to create more choices other way? Like, how did you instill those values throughout these transactions?
Yeah, great question. So I guess short answer is no, we didn't kind of have a grid or a matrix like that. Similar, I think one of the things that was different is that we wrote down the idea of non-negotiable principles. One of the entrepreneurs that's always been a great kind of mentor advisor, whether he knows it or not, just every conversation we have, he gives me these wonderful pearls of wisdom. And I'm like, I've learned so much from you, Dave. And I don't think he'd ever say he's my mentor, but he definitely learned a ton from him. One of the things that he said is you got to get comfortable with the idea that when someone buys the company, they're buying the right to have control. So you need to make sure that you adopt, any change that they're really looking to do, unless it's a non-negotiable change. So you think about it as binary. You accept it or you're willing to get fired for it.
Ooh, I like that. Yep.
Yeah. And it's a really great way to frame it, because you look at it, it's is this an issue I'm willing to get fired over? Makes it way easier. So stuff that a lot of people get hung up on, like the coffee machines, the food that's going to be in the kitchen, the scheduling of events, whether we use Zoom or Microsoft Teams, or whether we, because we're an international company, do we all get, Canadian and US holidays, or do we have local ones? Really easy. It lets you not care about those and, help your team with that change. Because if someone acquires your company, chances are they're bigger than you. They're more, as a company, then they're more mature. So they have more processes. It's part of it. So effectively, you're just kind of growing up really fast. But it also gives you permission to be a cantankerous jerk on the things that are really important. For us, things like that were, I remember we always saw vacation as a negotiable. It's and I remember one employee in particular, she negotiated, hey, I'm comfortable taking a little bit lower salary, but I want the extra week vacation. And I know you have a flexible policy, but I'd really like that to be in my employment contract because that matters to me. I'm like, great. That's personal choice. That's really, really important. And I know it was important to her. When NetSuite acquired our company, HR wanted to standardize on everything. And they're like, no, she only gets 2 weeks now. And for me, it was like, no, that was a personal promise that I'd made to one of my team members. I'm willing to get fired over this. And it was entertaining because HR didn't get it. I was like, why is Joseph pushing about this. The bankers involved in the transaction were like, well, this is what we're going to do because there's legal compliance. It's like, well, no, we sell HR software. We know what the legal framework is for this.
Yeah, nice try. Can't pull that one over on me.
Yeah. And so it made it easy, I think, for me as the founder, but it also made it really easy for the team to say, look, we know Joseph's going to fight for the things that are actually really important. And anything that he's not fighting on, maybe it's not that big a deal and we can get over it. So
Super, super good way to, I mean, truly they can see by your actions and they know what to expect based on the clarity there. Going back to the deal that fell apart at the 11th hour, was there any of this stuff involved, or what was some of the reasons that the deal fell apart?
I wish there was. I was naive and young, hadn't gone through this. Thank you very much. So the nature of it was, so our largest competitor was a subsidiary of a larger firm. Effectively, they were licensing. It was kind of like a franchise thing. And they didn't like having to be a franchise and paying all the franchise fees. So they thought, hey, if I just buy this competitor, I can run that business. I mean, they're being very entrepreneurial. I love the thinking. It's great. Except we structured the whole agreement under their new holding company that was going to own this new thing. So there was no personal guarantees, no name participation. It was just this new entity. And I mean, everything looked good. It looked okay. It was a very small business. It was a very small transaction. We're literally walking out of the office carrying boxes into the trunk of a tiny little Hyundai Elantra.
That close.
Yeah, like it was going to be an hour and a half highway drive, and we're going to like shake hands, transfer data, everything like that. It was great. I mean, we were going to be out of the business. There was a couple of months of part-time, carryover. We're dropping stuff off, and they call us up and like, our financing has fallen through. We're not going to be at the meeting.
Oh my gosh.
And the immediate reaction was like, okay, great. We're going to call you back because we're in the middle of a parking lot at the moment. And of course, it's like
process.
Rip open the deal docs. Like, what is this? What is the ramification? Are they allowed to do this? Like, what the? And I'm like, yeah, okay, they can't under the terms of the agreement. But our actual only option is to chase this holding company that has no money in it under their own declaration. So we learned a lot from that. The sad part was that we were so mentally disengaged with the business then is we effectively mothballed it and shuttered it because we'd already gotten to that finish line. Yeah.
Oh man. So going with the business's sense, like how have you protected yourself from that, like those circumstances?
So part of it, I think the large part was the very emotional lesson about getting ourselves so emotionally vested in the transaction that we didn't have a recovery plan. And in tech companies, the way that happens is the acquirer gets the founding team so excited. They say, as part of the diligence, we really want to meet the team, understand how the roles are going to change. And so then as a founder, you tell the team, by the way, we might get acquired by this company. We're going to do some interviews, and here's what it might mean. But then everybody's getting excited. Like, what does this mean? Am I going to get some money out of this? Or we're going to have some new bosses all involved. And at the end of the day, if it looks like it's going to fall apart, it actually comes down as, you know what, this doesn't look like what we think it's going to be. So either the deal's going to fall apart or we need to apply a big discount to it. And a lot of entrepreneurs get themselves in that situation. And part of the ways we protected the team was we only ever gave access to kind of key employees so that they'd be involved. And these would be employees that we'd say, hey, legitimately, this might not happen. So don't promise this, don't do this, because it may not happen. And we only brought people in to meet our team when the transaction was closed.
Got it. So did you tell anybody, like any part of your team, like prior to were they part of the due diligence or anything like that? Or was it you guys just doing it so that way because a lot of people like overcompensate by giving away an unproportional amount of equity or stay bonuses because it's always like an after the fact or afterthought. And how did you guys handle that?
Yeah. So we always had really participatory approach to equity. So I've always believed in every employee getting options or equity depending on when they joined. During the diligence, there's always key employees that have to participate. I'm reaching back. So the last time we closed the transaction, it's been 2013. There was 26 people in the company, so a small team. And I think we had 6 of us on the key employee list. So there's 6 of us that knew about the transaction before it was officially done. And I mean, the reality is, though I shared the way I did it all as this neat bow, but it caused a lot of anxiety because our team was used to, hey, when we close a major financing, we've got an all hands. We talk about, by the way, we've raised X million dollars, high fives, here's what we're doing, let's get to work. We pulled one of those meetings together and everyone expected, great, we've raised X million because investors had been going through. And instead, it was like, by the way, we've sold the company. The new buyers are downstairs in a coffee shop. We're going to bring them up soon. And I know it caused a lot of fear and uncertainty. We busted our asses to make sure that the team was taken care of, and so there was a big win for everybody. But yeah, the trade-off was that we couldn't carry people along that journey, so we did have to over-index on time afterwards with them. But it avoided a scenario where we had effectively, promised that we would sell the company and then had to roll it back because
oh my gosh, I've watched that just destroy companies, because you can do it as like you and your partner had that situation and you can handle however you want to deal with it, but all of a sudden you got a bunch of other people that are responsible for chugging along the company. It's a whole different story.
Totally.
Moving on to so I want to go and talk about you've successfully scaled and sold multiple companies. You're young, right? You're not sitting here at 70 years old. You talked about you want to be having this next journey be longer because of your kids. So before I get into, I want to make sure that we spend some time at the end towards like how you're structuring this more long-term approach with your company compared to the other more rapid exits. So let's get there. But before, you're big on sales, and what are some of the sales strategies and tactics that have allowed you to scale these companies to a point where the revenue and the growth is appealing to other people and is now something that people actually are yearning for to purchase?
Yeah, I love that question. So the first thing that I should share is that most of my experience is all B2B. So, if folks are listening in and they've got more of a consumer business, some of my comments may not entirely apply. And I recognize that. I won't be offended if you disagree.
Well, then that's where you get into. It's one note on that too, Joseph. Is like it's because I grew up in B2B, right? It's copiers and managed IT services and you name it, and it's like I got clients now in B2C where it's consumer, where they're selling online, and there's this massive funnel with all these. It's like you don't need a $100,000 salesperson to sell dresses or sunglasses on Amazon. It's a little bit different. So I think this is, and that's why I'm intrigued with this question, is because when you integrate sales and marketing, it has to be a comprehensive approach, and you have more complex sales. It's truly, it needs to be systematized in order to grow a valuable business, because you can't build a forecast on nothing. So I think it's totally, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's just important context.
It's totally true. 100%. That B2B versus B2C thing, you're right about the kind of sophistication of the sales motion needed. I think there's a few other things that are really helpful. So the first one that comes to mind is that idea of measuring everything, like just everything. And I don't mean like write it down. If you have to, sure, but use the software, the tools to measure everything. Like, things like I don't use my cell phone for sales calls. I always use an app because it will track it and log it for me and let me know what the result was. Things like emailing. I never send sales emails from my mobile device because it's not hooked into things that will track it. I always send from my computer because I can move faster, but then it'll track everything. I share that because in B2C sales, for example, like especially with e-commerce or high velocity transactions, there are more things that are often measured automatically. In B2B, folks often lose track of it. The sales rep is driving between meetings, they hop into a call, nothing makes it into the CRM.
The sales rep is stubborn, won't plug anything to the CRM.
Totally. Yeah. But when it's like when you're B2C, and like if you've got a rep that is going to do 100 e-commerce transactions in a day, no, like everything is automated. So measure everything has been a big one. The second one, and again, I think this problem doesn't exist in B2C as much, is that in a B2B world, the way a founder sells, the way a CEO sells, cannot ever be replicated by an individual.
Thank you. And you're going to have thousands of people that are listening in right now go, oh my God, Joseph, thank you for saying that. Because they're all going, how do I replace myself, who's the passionate founder who knows everything about the business? And they can't. And that's one of the biggest problems people have.
Yeah. It's classic. The entrepreneur goes, okay, I found this great sales rep. I really like them. I bought from them. I want to have a sales experience like this. Come on board, listen to my calls, watch what I'm doing, and then kind of do what I do.
And then be me.
It's a recipe for failure. And it's not because an entrepreneur or founder is doing it badly. It's just the social construct is different. Like, think about it. Like an entrepreneur calls you up and is like, I've got this business. We're changing the world. Can I tell you a little bit about it? like inherently you're like, well, I'm excited. I want this person to win. I'm looking for an excuse to buy from them. That's very different, than you know, Jimmy or Susan who's like, hey, I'm the first sales rep at this company, and I'd like to tell you more about the problems that we solve. Like the mental construct is like, I don't want to talk to a sales
right
rep.
off the bat. Yep, 100%.
So just the social construct is so different, so they can't be the same. And I think really being deliberate as a founder to say, what are the things I'm doing that are actually moving the deal forward? And then looking at those and saying, is this something that I have to do or somebody else can do? And that's really how you figure out that sales role. So that's the hardest part. But once you do it once or twice in a given company, then you can hire many more.
So what when you think about, because I'm tracking you totally. So that from the measuring to, okay, let's say we've hired another person. So what are the ways that you've seen that like actually ratchet up the sales activity to be more predictable? Because I mean, it's gonna be a combination, like depending on, I came from the business to business technology sales. I got clients that are, you name it, but consulting or, manufacturing, whatever it is. So there's more of that process and building the relationship. How, like, what have you seen that really moves the needle forward as far as like the sales process, and how does that change per industry?
So the interesting thing, I'm going to answer the second part first, because I think this is an interesting one. The differences between industries have been narrowing, and the pandemic accelerated that. Like Toby Lutke, the CEO at Shopify, put it the right way. 2030 showed up early, and it's true. But the way every industry, every B2B industry is selling is becoming more and more like software as a service. So to give you an example, one of the companies that hired a bunch of our grads with great success, like they crushed it. They sell solar panels and solar technology. And their old way of selling was look at an industrial park who has a big roof. Let's knock on their door and say, hey, you can monetize it and we'll make it easy for you. And that worked out. Somebody goes, I got a big roof and I can make money. Okay. Pandemic stopped them from doing that. So their selling motion afterwards was like looking at LinkedIn to source companies, looking at Google Maps to assess size, reach out with email, video, messaging, just like a software company sells. There's a great Gartner study that talks about how 80% of online sales interactions, 80% of B2B sales interactions will happen online over the next 5 years.
Wow.
Another
great, that's crazy.
Yeah. McKinsey did a study asking business owners how much they'd be willing to spend never meeting the sales rep in person. Last year's study, 80% of them were willing to spend up to 50 grand never meeting the sales rep.
50, is that a year? Or what was the time?
No, in a transaction, like in a transaction. Yeah.
Whoa.
So and kind of just,
crazy?
the idea of people selling over Zoom kind of calls the way software gets sold is going to happen in every industry. So that's a helpful one, I think, for the audience. Because if you're not doing it, your competition is, and that means like you might be in New York and that team in Mexico City is going to sell to your customers. So yeah, it's scary. The things to do as a company owner, though, like the two things I highlight are the idea of getting to the right amount of scale early on helps you assess better, and focusing on the customer's experience. So right amount of scale. If you're doing the sales as an owner, don't hire one sales rep, hire two. Your first hires, it should be a pair. Otherwise, you can't compare. All you can compare is them saying, I'm doing this thing, and I think we should do it this way, and you should do it this way. And it's it's opinion. Whose opinion's better? If you have two sales reps, then you can actually say, hey, here's the motion, and they can actually compare results. And then they know it's not you or the market, it's what they're doing. So that's number one. Always start with two. On the knowing the customer, most founders that I bump into, most entrepreneurs, know their product really well. Like if you're selling promotional goods, you know the inventory, you know the way it works. If you're selling software, same thing. If you're selling auto parts, you know all the machining. A sales rep doesn't need to know the product. Like a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that. They don't need to know anything about the product. What they need to know is everything about the customer. What's their pain point? What do they experience day to day? What gets them? I'll make a real example. Part of what if folks are listening in, they can't see me do the scare quote sell, is we pair our grads with tech companies who are hiring sales reps. So to a certain extent, it's like we're selling the talent. We're like, hey, hire our grads. It makes us very happy. We could talk about the features and the benefits. They hit quota faster. They hit quota higher. They've got industry experience. We could talk about those things, and that's really good. I was just on a call yesterday, and what they were experiencing, what the CEO was experiencing, was that he's in the middle of raising his Series B. And he's like, so we need to make sure we hit our revenue targets so this round comes together the way we want. And as we're wrapping up the call, what we talked about was, how do we take some more time off your plate so you can focus on that B? And how do we guarantee you that you're going to hit your numbers so that your round comes together? Because that's what he's obsessing over. He doesn't actually care about the ramp time and the quota attainment. If he needs to hire 10 reps instead of 8, he'll do that to make sure he gets the round. And helping your first sales reps, as owners, you know the customer, you really do. You think you're connecting because you know the product, but it's the customer experience that you need to equip your sales reps with.
So insightful, Joseph. And like the reality is like so few people are good at listening and actually being curious about the customer. And I think, so I think by it, maybe back to your kind of the social contract, the business owners and the founders generally create, a lot of times they create a product or service that fits the need that they hated or the need that was out in the marketplace. So it's like kind of like that's why your new business is there, right? So you're like, so you actually know the customer so well because you're helping solve the problem. And it's not about the product is actually just solving the problem. So you're just describing the problem in a different way.
That's exactly it. It's like you don't even realize what you know so much about.
Interesting. So, because I know we're getting close to the end of here, is I'm super curious with like multiple exits and all your sales knowledge and just your ability to scale. How, like when you're thinking about this venture, because this is it's important for you to be doing the right things. You said you wanted to last longer. What are you doing differently in this company to accomplish that compared to some of the other things that you've done?
I think one of the big things, it's really hard. I hear the question and my immediate reaction is like, well, we're doing this different. We're doing this different. It's like, yeah, I've gone through a couple of companies and every time we just raise the bar. So it always feels just as hard, which really, at some point I need to do something that feels easier. My wife
You wouldn't be happy, man. Come on. That's human biology.
I think the one thing we are really doing different is bringing in experienced leaders sooner and faster. So really trying to push ownership of different areas of the business down to the executives we're bringing on in a much more significant way. And, it's so uncomfortable. I suck at it.
What's uncomfortable about it for you? I'm just super.
So one of the challenges of being an entrepreneur is that you know everything about the business. But that means you know a dangerous amount of marketing, but you're not a marketing expert, a dangerous amount about your product, all these things. And you have opinions about everything. So it's
that's true. That.
it's really hard to say, hey, go do this. And I trust you to not ask for my feedback. Because if you ask for my feedback, I'm going to give it. But all that does is undermine people's confidence. So that's what I find so hard, getting to the point where I can. And I try to use these words to remind myself how to do it. It's like, I trust your decisions. So it's like, just go run with it. And then I try to be specific when I feel like I need to be involved. And it's a hard thing because as a CEO, you see every little bit of the business. And so one of my employees phrased it the right way. It's like, things are good when Joseph has enough confidence that he's letting you run with it. But when he's asking questions, that can feel like he doesn't have confidence. And those moments feel like the eye of Sauron kind of focusing on you. And, and it's innocuous questions sometimes. You're like, I want to hear what's new with the customers. And people are like, crap.
Why is he asking? Am I not doing my job?
So I need to work on that because it's a tough one.
How about with the overall potential liquidation? I mean, every business could trade. And in this one, you said you wanted to last a lot longer. And I'm going to see if I can put some color to this question to make sure that it lands correctly. Is that what I want? One of the things that I want for this show, Joseph, is that someone that can be super, super passionate and excited about their business and what they're doing and the impact that they're making, the wealth that they're creating, also holding this spot for, hey, I could get an offer that doesn't align with my timeline. Like, cause we can't, what's the whole, what's Mike Tyson? Everybody makes a plan, then you get punched in the face, but you still want that plan. And so how are you looking at the business model differently? When and how you could potentially get that liquidation event while staying as passionate about the legacy that you're and the impact that you're making?
Yeah. So number one, I don't try to think about it as how do I make sure I could always entertain a transaction right at the moment. So I try to not thinking about it that way because I want to focus on building a really good company. And ultimately, if you build a really good company, acquisition opportunities come.
Mm-hmm.
What I do think about, though, is how do I avoid hiccups that could interfere? So, one of the investors that I talked to, I think, put it really, really well. When someone's looking at investing in your company or they're looking to buy your company, they're not generating a list of all the reasons to buy. What they're doing is they're generating in their head the list of all the reasons not to buy. So as they go through, they're like, oh, that's ugly. I'm going to put a list on that. Oh, that's ugly.
Okay.
Look at it. Oh, that's ugly. Look at that. And then at some point, that list gets long enough. They're like, there's too much hair on this. I don't want this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I try to think about it as we're running the business. How do I avoid things that would be on that list? And there's stupid fundamental things like, does everybody have an employment contract? Do you have a list of the vendors that you work with? Did you file your taxes? Like, these sound really silly.
Yeah, no, you're right though.
As an entrepreneur, you're putting out fires and you can never put them all out. So I try to prioritize thinking about it as, like, if something came in today, is this thing going to be a hairy, nasty thing on that list that might scupper a transaction? Because if it's not, that means it's probably not the most urgent thing. And so we try to keep our house in order. And as a result, every time we've been in a transaction, the buyer has always remarked, wow, this was really, really smooth. This was really easy. Like, we expect to find skeletons in the closet and there weren't any.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it easy for us. It means that naturally the transactions are maximized because they're not going to try and negotiate it down. And
you have options.
then I'm just trying to prioritize day to day. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got options. I mean, fantastic. So I know we're short here. I want to ask two final questions. And the first one is I love asking the people what the word intentional means, Joseph, because the name of the show, and I've learned a lot by just people's answers. So I'm curious for you, what does the word intentional mean?
Intentional really means having a deliberate end goal and pushing yourself every day to move closer to that goal. It's not just a nice to have, it's actually moving towards it.
Love that answer. So then the last one is, if people want to know more about you, the business, where's all your contact information? What are you doing now? And what can people do to find you?
Totally. If anyone's looking to hire B2B sales reps, they can always hit us up on the website, uvaro.com, UVARO.com. Always happy to help place our grads somewhere. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm on most social channels like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all at Joseph Fung. That's Fung, all one word. And always happy to connect, especially with other founders and entrepreneurs.
Joseph, this has been a blast, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Likewise, Ryan. Thanks for having me.